Hello, welcome to a new edition of the Right Wing Populist Podcast. I am the Right Wing Populist. So today I want to talk about, I think, a few topics. The first one mainly having to do with the fact that Trump is the most popular second-term president of the 21st century, at least according to the Real Clear Politics average of polls. Real Clear Politics is the gold standard. It is the OG polling aggregate. So, sometimes you see these left-wing libtards trying to dismiss Real Clear Politics, but the reality is they're the best. They've been the most accurate polling aggregate, certainly in all the Trump elections. So dismiss Real Clear Politics at your peril. The fact that Trump, not by a lot, but is still the most popular second-term president of this century is actually kind of a big deal. Just want to break that down. I also want to break down the fact that it looks like Kamala, Miss Brat herself, is seriously planning on running in 2028. I want to talk about what a disaster that would be for the Democrats. And maybe another topic. We'll see how it goes. But before we get into all of that, I want you to subscribe, whether it's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever the hell you listen to this amazing audio experience. I'd really appreciate it. My fault for not having the weekly wrap this past Saturday. I was still under the weather. I'm still a tiny bit under the weather, but I think I sound much better. So, sorry for the scheduling issues, but we should be back on track this week. I really appreciate you all. And the traffic for the podcast has been awesome these past couple of weeks. I really appreciate the support, and let's keep it going, folks. I'm an independent content creator. Not the icky kind, not the kind that has the OnlyFans link in his bio. I'm doing honest work here, folks. I'm just talking into a microphone. You either like it or you don't. You don't have to see no shirtless pics for me, folks. You'd like the shirtless pics, I'm sure. I'm in pretty good shape these days. Pretty handsome. By the way, for those wondering, I promise you this. If we get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, there will be a face reveal. So, in a full name reveal. I am Chris. My name is Chris for those who want. I have accidentally referred to myself as Chris at times. So, my name is Chris, but if you want the full name and what I look like, we have to get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. That is the goal, folks. So, if you want to see my pretty face, get me to 1,000 subs on YouTube. That's the goal. So yes, as I was saying, over the weekend, there are some new polls that came out that actually bumped Trump's approval rating up just by a little bit, but significantly. And as I said, now, according to the Real Clear Politics average, Trump is, at least at this point in the second term, about a year into his second term, Trump is the most popular second-term president a year into his second term. Right now, he's at 43.7% approval. At this time during Obama's second term, Obama was at 42.6%, and at this point in Bush's second term, he was at 42.5%. So Trump's up by more than a point over Obama and Bush. Now, look, that's not saying a lot. Obviously, we're still talking about being below 45%, which is not ideal, no question about it. But you have to think of it like this. Number one, both Obama and Bush, frankly, had institutional support that Trump simply doesn't have. The media loved Obama, the mainstream media. They were just slobbering all over Obama during all 8 of his years as president. And even Bush, while Bush was not popular in the mainstream media, there was more institutional support for Bush. Just because he was, an establishment Republican, he was a war whore. So all the wagons, certainly in the conservative media, was supporting Bush, regardless. With Trump, as we see now, there's much more of a debate on the right about the direction of what the Trump administration should be doing. There was no such debate during the Bush years. Everyone on the right was pretty much gung-ho on being a neocon, interventionist, war whore. With the Trump administration, there's debate. You have arguments between Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro, Nick Fuentes, Mark Levin, all these idiots. Well, Tucker's not an idiot, but the rest of them, maybe a little idiotic, and that's okay. But there's real debate here, and Trump doesn't have the same type of institutional support. Now, he does have podcasting in a way, obviously, that Bush didn't. But the point is, the fact that Trump is actually a little bit higher than both Bush and Obama is actually a little telling. Because I've been seeing all this dooming on the right. Oh, Trump's approval is so unpopular. We're going to lose the midterms. It's like, number one, we were always going to lose the midterms next year. Okay? just given history. The party that's in power almost always loses seats in the midterm. There's like two exceptions. I think one of them was after 9/11, Republicans gained seats in 2002. That's probably only because 9/11 happened and there was sort of a patriotic surge and wanting to, support the president, and the Republicans benefited because of that, because Bush was the sitting president, he was a Republican. So yeah, Republicans, this sounds a little gross in a sense, but it's just a fact. They did benefit from the tragedy that was 9/11 electorally, at least in 2002. Obviously, I'm not saying Republicans were necessarily trying to politicize 9/11, but that's just what there was, just a public sentiment that we need to support the commander in chief, and the commander in chief is a Republican, so we're going to vote for Republicans. That's what happened in 2002, more or less. Plus, Democrats were so incompetent, but let's not even get into that. I think there's maybe one other example, but like I said, the party, even in 2022, Republicans massively underperformed expectations, but they still took back the House. Democrats still lost seats because that's just what history shows. And the Republican majority is so slim, it's so tiny, it's like extremely small. Like, there's no way. I've always thought that Republicans were going to keep the House. Now, the Senate's a whole different discussion. I think the Republicans are going to keep the Senate. For Democrats to actually flip the Senate, they'd have to win at least one or two states that Trump won by at least 10 points. I just don't see that happening. They'd have to win either Ohio, Texas, Florida, Iowa. I just don't see that, folks. I just don't see it. I mean, those states will probably be single digits in the midterms as opposed to double-digit victories like Trump had. But is a Democrat really going to win Texas? I just don't see it. Texas has been the white whale for Democrats for years, but it never happens. And all the gains Democrats have been making the past 10 years, 12 years, 14 years in Texas, Trump totally wiped him out. Even Ted Cruz won by like 9 points. And look, maybe that's really the bar that we should be gauging, is Ted Cruz's performance this past election, not Trump's, because it is a Senate race. Trump's a little bit different. But Ted Cruz still won by like 9 points. And Ted Cruz, he didn't do as well with Hispanics compared to Trump, somewhat ironically, of course. Ted Cruz did worse with Hispanics than Donald Trump. Donald, they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some are good people. That Donald Trump did better than Ted Cruz. So, make of that of what you will. But Ted Cruz still won by 9 in Texas. In 2018, when that was a close Senate race between Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke, Cruz still won by like over 200,000 votes. Texas is a red state. I just don't see it flipping. Iowa, same thing. I'm sorry. Democrats still think Ann Seltzer was right, I guess. They still think that there's a good chance that Iowa is going to be competitive. I don't see it. I know Joni Ernst is retiring. That probably helps Republicans, honestly, instead of hurting them. I mean, I understand, there's this idea that incumbency is so important, but frankly, she made so many missteps. I think she made comments about people die regarding healthcare subsidies that are about to be, that are expiring. So the fact that she's no longer representing Iowa is probably a good thing for the Republicans and a bad thing, if you want to know the truth. Ohio, I could see Ohio being closer. Ohio used to be one of the most important swing states. Under the Trump era, it became a solid red state, or, very Republican-leaning state. Obviously, it looks like the former Democrat senator who just lost, what's his name? Sherrod Brown. It looks like Sherrod Brown's going to try to run again. Could he win in a favorable Democrat environment? Maybe. I don't know. I don't see it. It's possible. I mean, I'd be a little bit more concerned about Ohio than I think Iowa or Texas, but I still think, again, Trump won that state by 11 points. You'd have to see a shift of over 11 in Ohio. I just don't see that. In Florida, I think it's extremely unlikely Democrats could win Florida. I don't see that at all. I mean, the last several statewide races in Florida, the Republicans have won by double digits. Trump won by 13. The Republican Senator Rick Scott in Florida, he won by 13. DeSantis won the governor's race by almost like 20 points in 2022. Miami-Dade has flipped Republican. I know there's this hubbub about Democrats winning the mayor's race in Miami, but Trump lost the city of Miami, but he won the county overall. People have to understand, Miami-Dade's not just Miami. He still lost Miami. He just won the overall county. And look, it is true that it was a Republican that was the outgoing mayor, but he was barely a Republican. I mean, he endorsed Hillary Clinton. I believe he endorsed Joe Biden. He's barely a Republican, so the fact that a Democrat is replacing a Republican who was effectively a Democrat, I don't think is particularly troubling. Although the margin wasn't great for Republicans, that's true. I'm not trying to be dismissive of it. I'm just saying I just don't see a path for the Democrats to take back the Senate still. Especially, another good news for Trump, Richard Barris, who's like the best pollster. I don't care what anyone says. He's been one of the most accurate pollsters ever since 2014. And he released a new poll, and in this poll, it shows Trump improving. He has Trump at 47% approve, 49.9% disapprove. So he's still underwater in this poll. However, Trump's gained a net 3 points in the poll, or about 2.8. His approval is up 2.2% from his last poll, and his disapproval is down 0.6 from his last poll. And he does have Democrats leading in the generic ballot by about 3.5 points, but that's not, that's what I would expect. And, on the economy, he does have Trump underwater, but he's only underwater by about 2.4%. He has him down on foreign policy by about 2%. He has him down 6 in the Israel-Palestine conflict, which I don't get that, but whatever. But in immigration, border security, Trump's up 4.4. Crime and safety, Trump's up 1.2%. So these numbers are not terrible. They're actually pretty solid. They're solid for a second-term president. And that's what I want to emphasize here, is Trump's not nearly as unpopular as people are making him out to be. And assuming his approval rating stays where it is, and frankly, given the trends, it looks like his approval rating is increasing. If it continues to stay the same or increase by a bit, the Senate is going to be safe Republican. You don't even have to think twice about it. And yeah, the House will likely flip Democrat, but it'll probably be about the Democrats flipping the House by they'll probably net gain 15 seats, which would be a solid victory for Democrats. That would make a solid majority for them, given the makeup of the House right now. But that's not a blue wave. I don't think we're going to have a blue wave this. I think Democrats will win back the House because the Republican majority is so small, and frankly getting smaller based off the likely retirements, according to outlets like Politico that may be coming. But it's such a small majority that Democrats could have just a modest victory and still take back the House comfortably. But I don't think it's going to be a blue wave. But we'll see what happens. But just want to make it clear, Trump is the most popular second-term president, at least within the first year of his second term. I think people should be aware of that. It's still not great numbers, and both Obama and Bush were terrible presidents, so maybe the fact that Trump's only leading them by a bit is maybe telling in its own right, but I just think it's important to remember that Trump's not doing as bad as some people make it out to be, especially if you grade him on a curve or compare him to previous presidents. Anyway, let's get to the second topic. So, according to the libtard outlet Axios, Kamala Harris is seriously considering another run for the White House in 2028. I'll read you a little bit of the article, and then I'll break down some of the details that according to the report, Kamala Harris is seriously considering another presidential run. Kamala Harris isn't planning to go gentle into the good night. This week, the former vice president made clear to potential 2028 rivals that she's working to keep another White House campaign viable. Why it matters. Despite worries from party leaders and donors that she can't win, Harris remains at or near the top of most 2028 Democratic primary polls. She also has strong support among black voters, the most critical voting bloc in most recent Democrat presidential primary states. That's true. And I'm not going to, you sort of get the point there. Some of the other details, it says that her book tour is expanding. She's appeared before the Democrat National Committee. She's apparently using new rhetoric. I guess she gave some speech to Democratic officials. And she, I guess, was criticizing both parties and just the status quo in general, which is definitely a different type of rhetoric that, she had during the 24 campaign. She basically ran as a status quo president while trying to distinguish herself from Joe Biden. Never really worked. It was never going to work. People weren't happy with the status quo. And she was unwilling to separate herself enough to really make that pitch to voters. So that's why she lost. So this would be a disaster for the Democratic Party if she ran. Number one, it is true that she is leading, or at least in second place, in most of the polls. Now, to me, that shows extreme weakness on her part. The fact that she's in second place in some of these polls, or a very weak first place, under 50%, even in the polls that she's leading, that shows that she's actually a very weak candidate. Because you want to remember, folks, when it came to Trump running again in 24, he was leading in all the Republican primary polls. Even in the direct aftermath of January 6th, there were polls that had Trump leading by a lot still about who Republicans wanted to be the standard bearer in 24. So that's why Trump was always going to be the Republican nominee, and why I always thought DeSantis trying to challenge him was just a disaster for DeSantis. Just a terrible mistake. Trump was always going to be the Republican nominee in 24. The signs were there from the beginning. With Kamala Harris, I'm not seeing those signs, folks. I'm not seeing it. Number one, she's incompetent. She doesn't like making tough decisions. That's why, she wouldn't go on podcasts like Joe Rogan. She needs everything to be structured for her. She wants the decisions to be easy. She basically wants people to essentially tell her what she should do, and then she could pretend she's making a decision when in reality she's just doing what people told her to do. She's incompetent. And the reason why it'd be such a disaster for the Democrats is, it is true, as Axios pointed out, she probably would do well with African American voters. And what that would mean is that you'd have a slug out. Maybe between her and Gavin Newsom, maybe between her and Pete Buttigieg, the gay guy. You probably would have a slug out between her and some other challenger. And if you're the Democrats, you want to be united. Because the Republicans are going to be united. For all this talk about Ted Cruz maybe running, Glenn Youngkin, J.D. Vance will be the Republican nominee, and it probably won't be much of a contest. And so Republicans are going to have their candidate very quickly. So it's really going to be up to the Democrats whether or not they want to go through a slug out, or if they want to, coordinate someone and make it clear who the party's picking. But the problem with that is Democrat voters, I think, are sick of the party essentially choosing the nominee for them. It's basically happened in 3 straight Democrat nominating cycles. 2016, they rigged the primary in Hillary's favor. The voters didn't have a full say in that. 2020, same thing. They rigged it against Bernie again, Joe Biden. The establishment coalesced against Joe Biden before Super Tuesday and handed him the nomination over Bernie. Not only that, people forget the Democrats stole the Iowa caucuses from Bernie in 2020. Bernie Sanders won more votes than Pete Buttigieg, and he got more state delegate equivalents, but the problem was this app didn't work, quote unquote didn't work, and it allocated delegates incorrectly based off where the votes were coming from, so all of a sudden Pete Buttigieg got less votes but got more delegates, so he was the Iowa caucus winner. But that was only because they weren't allocating the delegates correctly. So Bernie got screwed over in 2020. He still endorsed Joe Biden, by the way. That shows you what a weakling Bernie is, but let's not even get into that. I talked about that more last week. And then in 2024, there was no real Democrat primary. They canceled primaries. Even when you had people like Congressman Phillips, trying to challenge Joe Biden for the Democrat nomination. No one took him seriously. The media laughed at him. And they canceled primaries. And then when they forced Biden to drop out after not having a primary, and then there's no primary to actually replace Biden, Kamala Harris is essentially anointed the Democrat nominee, the nomination. So, in 3 straight presidential nominating cycles for the Democrats, the people didn't really get a full say. I mean, they got no say this past cycle, obviously. I mean, they canceled primaries. So, I do think the voters are going to be much more unwilling to go with just what the establishment wants, especially considering Democrats lost 2 of those 3 elections coming from those cycles, and and the one they won was rigged, by the way, and everyone knows it. So I think they're going to take a look at a progressives, maybe someone like Ro Khanna, maybe AOC. But again, Kamala Harris is, I think, going to have that black support. She is going to have establishment support. So it's just going to muddy the waters. Do the Democrats really want to do a rerun? It's a little bit different with Trump. I mean, Trump is a unique figure. Many of the Republican voters thought he got fucked over in the 2020 election. I don't think most Democrats think Harris got fucked over. I think most of them think she lost fair and square. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. It's interesting, I think it's good for Republicans if she runs because I think she is a weak candidate. And I think it's bad for Democrats because it's just going to muddy the waters. It'll probably guarantee a prolonged primary. Or it won't. Maybe Democrat voters have seen enough from her and know that she can't win. That's possible too. So, we'll see what happens. But it looks like Kamala Harris seriously considering running. I think it's good for Republicans. I think she's a weak candidate. I think it'll cause a prolonged Democrat primary, which will be bad for Democrats and, like I said, good for Republicans. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Anyway, folks, that's it for today. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. Again, please subscribe, whether it's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I'd greatly appreciate it. If you are listening on YouTube, leave a comment. It helps with the algorithm. That's great. We'll be back tomorrow, folks. Bye-bye.